Good. Well, many thanks to GS1 for organising this event. I think it's been really successful so far, and hopefully everybody's getting some value from the session. My name's Steve Graham. I'm the Market Development Lead at OpenPeppol. For those that don't know me, I used to work at the Department of Health, and I wrote the NHS e-procurement strategy and set up and led the Scan for Safety programme. So we wanted to talk about how OpenPeppol works. Firstly, I think it's helpful to draw the distinction between Peppol and OpenPeppol. You see these words and it can cause confusion. So Peppol is what we do. And actually you'll notice here that Peppol is in lowercase. A lot of times, and in fact on the agenda, it's here today, it's appeared in uppercase, and actually that's changed now. So it's in lowercase. So Peppol is what we do. And what we do is to integrate business processes by standardizing the way information is structured and exchanged. So Peppol is the name of the network that we have and the specifications that we provide. And this all fits into a comprehensive interoperability framework, and that includes legal agreements, governance arrangements, and compliance measures. So that's what we do. OpenPeppol is who we are. And OpenPeppol was established in 2012. It followed a large-scale pilot that was co-funded by the European Commission and 18 other government agencies. And it was driven to address e-invoicing and cross-border public procurement. OpenPeppol is a not-for-profit democratic member-led international association established in Belgian law, and it's says here 464. It's actually now gone up to 473 members from the public and the private sector and from 39 countries. So that's who we are and what we do. It's useful, I think, to understand the different actors in the Peppol world. So the stakeholders that we have fall into three categories. So end users, sometimes they get called participants, Peppol participants, and these are buyers and sellers that are sending and receiving business documents. So in the world of the NHS, hospitals as buyers and suppliers as sellers. So obviously exchanging various documents all the time, invoices, purchase orders, advice notes, and potentially other documents as well. End users can be members of OpenPeppol, but they're not required to be, and that's sometimes something that people misunderstand. So to be able to send a Peppol message as an end user, you don't need, or to receive, you don't actually need to be a member of OpenPeppol. And then we have service providers, and again, these get different names, but sometimes they're called access points or SMP providers. And these are the businesses that enable the interoperability between end users over the Peppol network using the Peppol interoperability specifications, which are called the Peppol BIS. So the service providers are very key, and in fact, the largest majority group in the membership by some distance are the service providers. And for them, it's they have to become members of OpenPeppol. And I'll talk at the end a little bit about some of the entry requirements for them. And then we have Peppol authorities, and these are government agencies. We have 15 from 15 different countries around the world. The Department of Health and Social Care in the UK is a Peppol authority, although perhaps it's fair to say that it's not terribly active at the moment. And the role of a Peppol authority is to drive the adoption of Peppol within their jurisdiction. And again, it's essential that Peppol authorities are members of OpenPeppol. So those are the stakeholder groups. If we look at the evolution, so not quite as impressive as the Smith and Nephew timeline going back a century and a half, but here we go. So we were established, well, the project started in 2008 when it was an EU large-scale pilot. And then at 2012, OpenPeppol became established. Quite a lot of stuff on here on this timeline, don't propose to go through it all. But in terms of membership numbers, we had from 2013 to 2018, the numbers went up by 5 times. And from 2013 to to now, it's gone up by nearly 10 times. So, you know, a very good growth in terms of adoption, membership numbers, and therefore adoption of Peppol standards. And this is increasingly happening around the world. In 2018, Singapore became the first Peppol authority outside Europe. We have Australia, we have New Zealand, and we're currently working very closely with Japan, who are hopefully going to become a Peppol authority later this year. So increasing levels of adoption around the world. The trajectory keeps on going. And I guess it does that for a reason. So this is a list of the countries where the members are based. So you can see pretty good coverage. Probably the biggest bit is the bit in the middle in Europe, and that's where the origins are, and that's where the majority of members are located. But as we can see, it's beginning to increase around the world. So to try and understand how Peppol works, there's three pillars really important to kind of get a grip of. So firstly, the specifications, what we call Peppol Biz, and this is the content of a document and the format of a document that is exchanged between service providers on behalf of end users. And these are very detailed specifications that apply to a number of business documents, and the number of documents increases as time goes by. So it becomes a more and more comprehensive means for businesses to exchange documents between each other in an interoperable way. And by interoperability, it's always important to define what we mean by that. And for me, interoperability is the output of one system causing an action in another system. So if we think in terms of ordering, a hospital creates a purchase order in its system, it then has to arrive in the sales order processing system of the supplier, and Peppol enables that to be done in an automated fashion, end to end, without any interference if everything's done correctly. So no human intervention required, providing all the setup is done. So the interoperability is the key thing, and once you get that machine to machine working across organizations, then you have a real opportunity for business efficiency, not only for orders and invoices, but for many other things. And we maintain and refine and develop the specifications, and we have a release cycle 2 times a year, and that accommodates new requirements as they arise. Then we have the network, and this is the architecture that we utilize, and it allows the service providers who are certified by Peppol to send and receive the documents on behalf of their end users. And then we have the third pillar, the governance arrangements, and these are the legal agreements that exist between the different stakeholders, and that defines the rules under which the activity is undertaken and enables us to ensure compliance. And so we'll explore each of those in a little bit more detail. So the Peppol documents that we have currently, it's important to say that they're all based on international standards. So all of the documents use UBL, Universal Business Language, an international standard for this kind of stuff. And then when we look at perhaps say the invoice message type, that conforms with the European invoicing regulations and the VAT directives. So I appreciate that GB is no longer part of Europe, but nevertheless, many of these things are common practices across borders. And in fact, we see with Japan that they will be taking a derivative of the European standard for their invoice specifications. So although very much a European flavour to that, based on the global ISO standards, we then arrive at a set of documents that are currently in production, and you can see here that they fall into 2 categories. First of all, the pre-award, what we call pre-award. So this is the process that leads up to the agreement of a contract between a buyer and a seller. So typically in a public sector environment, this will be a tendering exercise, and so the key documents that are exchanged can be exchanged through the Peppol network, and you can see how some of those would apply from the list. And then on the post-award side, we have a group of procurement documents. So we would regard an invoice as a procurement document. Some finance people might not, but nevertheless, that's where we categorise it. So in the post-award phase, after a contract has been agreed, and bear in mind a purchase order can be a contract. So once that has been settled, then there's a whole group of document types that become relevant. So we've mentioned invoice, and along with that goes credit note. We have response messages, order messages, dispatch advice, message level response, so you can confirm that you've had a message received, so that the machine receives a message, it tells the machine that sent it that it got it, so you can close that loop. Catalogs and so on. So quite a group of message types. It's fair to say that around the world the focus has been on invoices. For me personally, with my background in the NHS, the ordering part is also a very significant piece to get right. If you get the order right, then you're probably going to get the invoice right. So these are critical documents that are exchanged routinely every day between buyers and sellers. And of course, there are many more types. So we are looking at logistics messages currently, and we're looking at messages that would support the tax administrations in terms of gathering VAT revenue data, and other things as well. So there's quite a lot of potential, and in theory, any message can be exchanged. So then onto the second pillar, which is the Peppol network, which we describe as a four-corner model. So this is quite an important thing to grasp in the world of Peppol. And the four corners, hopefully you can see on the screens, the little circles with the letters in, or letters numbers C1, C2, C3, and C4. So these are the four corners. C1 is the sender. So if we talk about an invoice, then that's the supplier. And then the receiver, C4, is the buyer in the case of an invoice. And in the left-hand box, which is a sort of beige color, this is a non-standardized environment. So in this environment, the supplier and the buyer, the sender and the receiver, use the systems that they have. They don't need to buy any new systems. They are able to send a message out of their existing system to a service provider. So again, we've talked about access points before as a service provider. So your access point service provider sitting in corner 2, and that's the service provider that is engaged by corner 1, the sender. Corner 3 is the service provider that is engaged by the receiver. So by having a service provider as an individual organisation, whether you're a buyer or a seller, you then have one service provider that allows you to connect with anybody else, any other end user in the network. So you have one service provider, connect once, reach the whole of the Peppol network. So all of the end users that are active, connected through a service provider are all within reach. And of course, there are hundreds of thousands of these around the world. So in the blue box, though, we're in the standardized environment. So this is the world of Peppol. So this is where all the Peppol biz and the rules around the network come into play. And that's what provides the interoperability. So a message comes out of corner 1 in the format that it comes out of the system that is used by corner 1. The service provider at corner 2 then translates that into a Peppol message, sends it to corner 3, who then sends it to corner 4, translating it back into the language that's understood by the systems used by corner 4. In the diagram, we have a couple of extra ingredients. So we have the SML and the SMP. The SML is the only centralized component in the network. So there is one SML wherever you are in the world. And this is like the registry, if you like. So it allows corner 2, it accesses the SML in real time, dynamically, machines talking to each other. And this allows corner 2 to find the SMP that is relevant to the end user that's receiving the message. The SMP, there can be many SMPs, and these are kind of, it's a capability registry, if you like. So in the service providers register the capabilities of their end user. So they may say as an end user, we can receive a purchase order. So that sits in the SMP. So once the service provider at corner 2 has found the SML, has accessed the SML, found the SMP, it then can find out whether the intended recipient is capable of receiving that message. And if the receiver is capable, then it's sent automatically. All that happens in real time, dynamic discovery process. And it's important that those pieces of the puzzle are present, because otherwise you could end up sending a message into a dead end and nobody would know that it's there, and that would be very problematic. So that kind of explains how it works. The service providers, there's more than 300 of them in the world of Peppol. There's, I think, 28 in the UK. But in theory, any of them, wherever they are in the world, can send the message to any other service provider wherever they are in the world. But as an end user, if you're choosing a service provider, well, there is a list on the Peppol website, which is peppol.eu. You can then find a listing, and that shows you which country every service provider is located in. So you can find very quickly a whole group of service providers, and then you determine which one you want to use. So moving on to the governance structure. So this is, again, very important. When we have this sort of complex world, we need to have rules, and we need to make sure everybody follows those rules as we have compliance management. And it's driven by this structure. So we have a General Assembly, which is all the members of the association, and that sets the statutes and regulations under which OpenPeppol operates. Then OpenPeppol has legal agreements with Peppol authorities, and in turn, Peppol authorities have legal agreements with service providers. And then in turn, the service providers have their agreements, commercial agreements with their end users. So those commercial agreements are not regulated by Peppol. The other agreements very much are. So that becomes the kind of legal framework, governance framework, if you like. So those bilateral agreements, very, very important. They are currently going through an update, a revision, and that will actually strengthen the governance structure further than it is already. So that's the third pillar. So quickly wanted to just mention about getting started in Peppol. So for service providers, as we said, they must become members of OpenPeppol. They have to participate in the relevant stakeholder community. So they work, in collaboration with their peers. They participate in domain communities. So this could be the pre-award community, the post-award community. They can stand for election to elected positions in the organisation. So managing committee, various other bodies that are elected. And they can participate and influence the development of Peppol. They have to go through conformance testing. They have to pass due diligence tests that we have in OpenPeppol, and also further due diligence requirements that the relevant Peppol authority has. So to get started, there's an email address. You contact us, and then we take it from there. So that's for service providers, and I think it's helpful for end users to understand that process, how that works. For end users to get started, well, pretty simply, you select a service provider, and then the service provider takes care of it. As I mentioned, end users not required to become members of OpenPeppol, but they are very welcome. They can be members. We have a member category for end users, and we very much, want more end user members. So we very much encourage that. And again, that enables end users to participate in the stakeholder community. They can stand for elected positions. We have 2 end users on our managing committee. So very important roles, that we listen and hear what end users require. So again, we encourage people to get involved. Mention that the first and simple step is you select a service provider, and mention that there is a list of those service providers on the website. If anybody would like to find out more about becoming a member, again, they send us a note to the email address, and we'll follow that up. So there we are, further information, and at that point I'll hand over to Anna, and then we'll hear a little bit more about the perspective from an OpenPeppol service provider.